Welcome to Elon Beyond the Bricks, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of Elon University to explore the stories, ideas, and innovations shaping our community. Thanks for joining.
Hello and welcome to Elon Beyond the Bricks. My name is Connie Book. I'm the president here at Elon University, and I'm super excited today to be visiting with Stephanie Marken. Stephanie graduated from Elon in 2008. She currently is a senior partner at Gallup, where she leads the country's major research initiatives around higher education and public opinion about higher education and so many elements of that. As a student, she worked on the Elon poll, so she got her start here at Elon and, of course, had great relationships with faculty who helped her be where she is today at Gallup. I'm also grateful that she serves on the Elon Alumni Board and the President's Roundtable. So welcome, Stephanie, to Beyond the Bricks. I'm so excited to have a chance to visit with you today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Stephanie, I'm just going to tell the audience a little bit about our experience together recently in Washington, D.C. So, Stephanie was a guest speaker to the National Association of Independent Colleges and Universities. This is a group of about 1,700 private universities that I'm a member of. I was served on the board, and I was chair of the association. So Stephanie came and reported on public opinion trends in higher education. And she's been doing this for over a decade. So she was able to really give us a longitudinal picture. And boy, was the crowd engaged. So this was a group of, several hundred college presidents, and Stephanie was taking Q&A. It was really, really a fun morning together in DC. So Stephanie, tell us a little bit about this body of work that you're responsible for at Gallup. And, share any insights you might want to.
Yeah, so I think it's always been a fascinating time to be measuring public opinion, especially as it relates to higher education. But I think really that's no less the case in 2025. There's so much surrounding higher education. People have such strong belief systems around it, informed by their own perspectives shared by their family members. And so the research that I was sharing in person with you, Dr. Book, was a body of research we've been collecting over the course of the last few years in partnership with Lumina Foundation. They've been a tremendous partner in helping us think about the state of higher education. So we survey in that project currently enrolled college students pursuing a 4-year, 2-year certificate or certification, credential or degree, as well as those who've stopped out of a post-secondary pathway or people who've never before enrolled in a post-secondary pathway. The purpose is really to understand the current and prospective student population, attitudes, opinions, beliefs, and really perspective on all things higher ed. And in the process, we've uncovered some really interesting insights. I think the insight that gets the most attention, for which I get the most questions, is always our confidence in higher education statistic. For those who don't know our work as closely, Gallup has been measuring attitudes towards institutions in American society for the better part of the last 30 or 40 years. So we have trends really stretching back over several decades where we're able to see how much confidence on average Gallup, the general public, has on a series of 17 major institutions: the military, small business, big business, Congress,
Lawyers,
does worse than
banking.
Congress. Yeah, exactly. Every major industry you can imagine. And in 2015, we actually added higher education to that list. And at the time, we saw just about 6 in 10 Americans essentially said they had a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in higher education. Unfortunately, that percentage has really consistently declined over time since we began measuring. Today, we find essentially 4 in 10 Americans have a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in higher education. And over the kind of breadth of that work, what we found is there are certainly differences between political parties. There are certainly differences between those who've completed a degree themselves versus those who haven't. We find Democrats, those who have a 4-year degree or higher, are much more positive about the industry itself. But what we find is a lot of the concerns around the industry are related to issues of cost, the political culture and climate on campuses, So that research continues to be a really important contribution that we make to this greater conversation surrounding higher education because we know it could be a leading indicator, right? Unfortunately, if people can't regain confidence, we anticipate that there would be a serious impact on enrollments long term. So that's one we're watching closely. At the same time, the good news that I shared with you in person, Dr. Book, and the other presidents in attendance was that most Americans are still really confident in the value of a degree or credential, which sometimes can feel a little counter to my earlier finding, which is that they're not confident in the industry. The good news is they see value in the output, but they generally feel like it's a really inaccessible system.
Yeah. I wanted all of our listeners to hear Stephanie at work because she is so good, and so all of those presidents were leaning in when she was talking, listening to these observations, and just the command of the data that Stephanie has. It's so impressive. So I wanted our audience just to have a little taste of that. So, when you are working for an iconic brand, right? Gallup, I think if you survey most Americans, they will say, and probably globally, they'll go Gallup, yeah, that's the polling. Like they'll connect the dot. They may not know every poll or every sector, but they'll know. It's kind of like working for Levi's. It's we associate Gallup with poll. And when you are working for an iconic brand, that must be pretty you must feel a sense of responsibility there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we feel a huge amount of responsibility to George Gallup, our founder, and really his mission surrounding the Gallup poll as he imagined it, more than 85 years ago now. We always say our mission at Gallup is to help people be heard, and I feel that deeply. That was actually what brought me to Gallup is the idea that it's really a pollster's privilege to actually report what people share to them. And it's amazing, I always get questions about shy voters or shy, respondents, and we don't get a lot of shy response. They share quite a lot about their personal lives and things that, frankly, they don't need to share with us. And I think that it's a good reminder of the trust that they're putting in us and the confidence that they're putting in us, and also the value that they see in a lot of the research that we share and that other researchers share with policymakers, influencers, leaders like yourself who can actually make a difference on some of these topics. But it is really a privilege that people continue to share their opinion. Response rates are certainly down in the US. It's harder than ever, ironically, to get people to participate, even though in theory they're more accessible than they've ever been, right? Everybody has a cell phone, but they don't answer their phone like they used to, right? So we have to get much more innovative in terms of how we survey folks and the ways in which we reach and also remind them to participate. But the fact that they still do, it is a signal of trust, and we take it really seriously.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. You said it with such clarity, too, right? Bringing people's voices on these key topics that affect the quality of all of our lives, affect the quality of our democracies. I mean, really, it is a privilege to be able to be a part of um, getting that story to change makers, right? Getting those thoughts and observations from people. So tell me a little bit about your Elon journey. How'd you land here at Elon?
Question. Well, there were a few students. I grew up in Massachusetts in a small community up there, and there were a few students who had actually graduated from my high school and gone to Elon. So I knew a little bit about it. And then I visited campus and I thought, like, wow, this place just feels different than every other campus that I visited to. And at the last minute, I actually decided to go early decision, kind of on a whim with a few minutes notice to my advisor and my mom. And I was so glad I did because I, of course, knew early on that that was really where I wanted to be. And so it was a relief to kind of learn early on that's where I would land. But, I was a first generation college student. I showed up as an undecided major at Elon. I loved political science. I loved the idea of studying politics, but I didn't really know what I would major in or study. And it was actually a conversation that I had with my then advisor, Dr. Charles Irons, in the history department. I was just about to declare my major, and we were sitting down. He had to sign a form so I could kind of transition over to the political science department. And I remember he asked, like, what do you want to study? And I was like, well, like, I really need a job when I leave here. So I'm going to be a business major. And he's like, why do you want to be a business major? I was like, because I really need a job when I leave here, Dr. Irons. And he was like, don't do that. What do you love to do? And He spent probably another like 5 to 10 minutes talking to me about some of the classes I've been taking in the political science department and my experience over there, how much I loved every class I took. And he said, "You should do that. You should study that." I
And
was like,
there'll
"What
be
is it?"
jobs there.
Yeah. He's like, "There will be jobs." I was like, "What does a political science major do when they
Yeah.
leave here?" He's like, "If you just follow what you love, if you learn what you love, it will all work out, I promise you." And, he must have been very convincing because I left a political science major from that class that day. But, it's a good reminder that an extra 10 minutes with a student can truly be transformative. It was because of that conversation that I ended up in the political science department, actually interning with Hunter Bacow in the polling department. And it was actually another important conversation Hunter had with me in 2008 when I was graduating into a terrible financial crisis, where he said, "You should really go to grad school because nobody's going to hire a political science major anyways. So you might as well keep going." And he sent me on a continued career path. So it's a good reminder that just a few extra minutes is completely transformative. And that was really my experience throughout Elon. I mean, there was no department, no class I took where I felt like people were just going through the motions. They were so engaged and present with students. And to me, that was really what distinguished the university.
So when you worked at the Elon poll, I guess back then we were calling. We were
Yes.
doing the actual calling. Yeah, so that was a good learning curve too, doing
Oh,
all
yeah.
that ground level surveying for the work you're
Yeah.
doing.
It is really humbling to call somebody during dinner and ask them to step away from their meal and their family and answer incredibly private questions. It's so funny. I think the most private question we ask, despite what everybody thinks, is your income, right? People don't want to tell their income to a stranger on the phone. And it's amazing how much work goes into getting somebody to respond to one of those interviews. But it was really humbling. Like the 10th time people hang up on you, you're really bulletproof at that point.
Yes, that's right. So at Gallup, I know you do the higher ed work. Is your portfolio include other major topics?
Yeah, so we're exploring a series of topics. We have really important survey work going on right now about the state of democracy, attitudes, opinions, and belief systems around it. Really important research about climate and water. We actually have ongoing research too outside of the US that includes the Gallup World Poll, where we're essentially collecting data among about 120 countries annually through probability based and representative sampling, which is just a huge undertaking. But really core to our work to helping people be heard is making sure that we're using quality, rigorous research processes and reaching people that are often under researched. There are many places and spaces within the United States and outside of it that rural communities are underreporting within survey based experiences. It's a real challenge. So we take a lot of pain to actually go to every part of the country, but also the world to make sure that we're really providing everyone a voice in some of these important conversations. To your earlier point, there's so many conversations we have nationally that are about people, but not with people, right? Higher education is kind of guilty of this, right? Where we measure the value of a college degree today by how much somebody makes. And of course, earnings are important. Nobody goes to college thinking they're going to earn less. But that really only tells part of the story of what a higher education experience can provide you. And so there's so much more that's critical to hear from people directly about. And I think too often we talk kind of about them rather than just going straight to them and asking, was your degree worth the cost? Which is such a simple question, but actually is amazingly interesting when you look at some of the patterns and trends surrounding it.
One of the things I say, Stephanie, that when people ask me about the work we do, I say, well, there's lots of learning happening, but college campuses are about human transformation. So it is more than just a degree. To your point, when you ask people that question, it can't just be measured by salary alone, but also about the transformation that happens around your own sense of purpose in life, values that you're going to carry with you into your personal and professional life. And at Elon, of course, we're very much around the experiential learning opportunity like you experienced when you were calling those people at dinner time to take a survey question. But the mentoring that happens, not just from the professor, but those experiences and your peers as your peers and you're talking it through.
Yeah, I mean, watching other students actually interview strangers was an incredibly profound experience for me. There was one call, I'll never forget. I was listening in as a supervisor to one interviewer administer an interview with a respondent who was just sharing I would say objectively abhorrent belief systems and really painful thoughts that they had about others from a discriminatory perspective and a racist perspective. And I thought to myself, wow, like this conversation is really important because this is how people feel. Like at the end of the day, I fell in love with public opinion polling, like in that conversation in that polling center, because I thought we need to hear from everybody, even people who you have wildly different belief systems from. It's so critical, right? And I think I really fostered a love for public opinion research in moments like those because you really do have to love it in order to design a survey that will reach everybody and truly capture everyone's perspective, including people who you have wildly different perspectives from. And I think that's just more critical than it's ever been before.
Yeah, in journalism, my undergrad was journalism, and there was a quote about shining light where darkness is. And I know it's captured on the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in their tagline, but it's all about how important it is, to your point, to capture those thoughts, to bring them to light so that we can work as a country to say, hey, this is not where we want to be. This is not who we want to be as a democracy. So it is a service. You're right. Incredible learning experience and a service. So, I'm going to tell the audience that no surprise that in 2018, Stephanie was named one of Elon's top 10 under 10 alumni. I was there that evening, very special time. And then I've always been impressed, Stephanie, that you make time for Elon, that even for me, making that request to talk to the other college presidents, that you're such an ambassador and such a great example of giving back to the institution. Can you tell me what motivates you to do that? Why you make time for us?
Yeah, sure. Well, I will say, Elon gave me so much, right? So to state it most simply, I think when you receive a lot, you're responsible to give a lot. And, when I came to Elon, like I said, I was a first generation college student. My family's making tremendous personal sacrifice to make that 4-year college experience possible for me. And I felt a lot of responsibility in that to make the best use of my time. But Elon also minded the gap a lot financially for me. Very practically speaking, they made it possible for me to actually attend via presidential scholarship and other opportunities like the Elon poll. There's so many students who we know do not have an internship experience because they're unpaid and you can't work for free, right? Most students can't afford not to work while they're enrolled. And the polling center was the best job on campus. You got fed. It was all the pizza, all the snacks you could eat. And it was this incredible semester-long stipend that really made it possible for me to have an internship. Otherwise, I would have had to work off campus. And not to say that can't be a valuable experience, but you really reduce the odds that it is. And so I feel like Elon invested so much practically and financially in me. And also the individual faculty members did too. I talked about Dr. Irons and Dr. Bacot and Dr. Rizal, and they really expended what I would describe, more objectively as like discretionary effort, right? So we always talk about engagement at Gallup and what it looks like for an employee to be engaged in their work. And we always say, that employee, when they're engaged, they expend discretionary effort. If the workday starts at 9, they're there at 8:30. If it ends at 5 and they have 5 students still standing outside their door, they're going to wait till all of those students are really answered and met with. And that was my experience consistently across campus. And so I feel a responsibility then to give back to the university because it gave me so much.
That's so lovely to say. For our audience too, Stephanie is a beautiful family herself and a growing family. And I'm curious because you are in the middle of futures work all the time with Gallup. So I'm sure that you and your husband are thinking about your young children and what your hopes and dreams. So what's like when you think about the future, what's one or two things that y'all are talking about in terms of hopes for this next generation?
Well, my son on brand today would only wear his Elon t-shirt to daycare, my 2-year-old. He was very determined. So he
We love that.
clearly
Spreading the
was
word, spreading the
in
word
a
at
mind
two.
meld with you on this good question. Yeah, I think a lot about that. I think a lot about like what will college look like when he's of that age and will he even have that experience? And I hope he does. But I would say my hope for his generation, really every generation that comes after him, is that there's a choice, right? So, we talk a lot about higher education and the benefits of it. Objectively, we know that people who have a 4-year degree or higher will out-earn their peers by somewhere between $1 and $2 million, depending upon which study you reference. And we also know their health and well-being will be so much greater. I mean, we see disease burden rates are so much lower among those who have a 4-year degree or higher. Their self-reported health is much better. So there are a series of objective reasons for which we know that higher education has value that we've uncovered empirically through our research with Lumina. But there's also, the very real, I think reality that we all have to face, that higher ed's not for everybody, right? Just because I had a great experience doesn't mean I expect everybody to go to a 4-year private institution and have that same experience. And I think for those who don't make that choice, I just hope it's their choice, right? That it's not a function of the practical limitations surrounding cost in particular that we know are really plaguing the higher education system. We do a lot of research around perceived value, perceived cost of higher ed in our ongoing research with Lumina, and price transparency is such a problem. Most prospective students have no idea what it actually costs them to enroll in a higher education institution. And yet at the same time, they're making this really high stakes decision at an otherwise very young age. And so I worry a lot that, we have people opting out of a system just because they think they can't afford it. Now, of course, we know there's so many accessible options available to people, community colleges, public institutions that are online and otherwise far more affordable than traditional college-age students will experience, and yet still they're not reaching most Americans. So I guess my hope or my aspiration for prospective students would be that it's actually their choice if they don't pursue a 4-year or 2-year or credential, and it's not because the system is inaccessible to them, which most Americans still feel it is.
Yeah, that's that's an area of focus for Elon. Is I always say we need to ensure we continue to have access to Elon for families. And to your point, if somebody has the capacity to go to college and the desire to do it, we want to make sure they go, right?
Yeah.
For the future, for all of us, right?
Yeah, for the economy, for GDP, right? We see higher levels of entrepreneurship and innovation when more people access higher education. So there's so many objective reasons to care deeply about people getting additional skills and training beyond high school. And my worry is that we have a whole generation of people who just feel like it's unattainable for them. And to your point, not because they can't functionally perform, but because they practically can't access it. We hear so much too about perceptions around flexibility, course offerings. We hear horrific stories qualitatively about students who feel like I had to stop out because the one class I needed wasn't offered that semester.
That drives me crazy.
Yeah,
and it costs them sometimes a year of their lives to wait until
exactly.
so I mean that
And
is
if
a real
we stop
issue.
out then, they might never return, right? Because it's so hard to return. So yeah, I worry a lot about that stop out rate and the 40 million plus Americans that we know are essentially lacking a degree or credential, took on some sort of opportunity cost or financial cost to enroll in the first place, and are now essentially worse off than had they never enrolled
because they
before.
didn't weren't able to secure that degree. Really well said. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for taking time today to be with us. And I know people are going to really enjoy hearing this conversation. You're doing great work. We're so proud of you. Thank you, Stephanie. Take
Thanks
care.
for having me.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Elon Beyond the Bricks. Please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and leave a review to help others discover the conversations that matter. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.